My name is Amelia, and moving into my mother's new home, where my stepdad and stepbrother already lived, was one of the most overwhelming yet eye-opening experiences of my life. Because as I packed my things and prepared to enter a house that was familiar yet completely different, I felt a mixture of excitement, nervousness, and uncertainty, wondering how I would adjust to their routines, rules, and expectations while trying to maintain my own sense of personal space and independence. And the first few days were especially challenging because every little detail seemed to highlight the differences between our habits, like how my stepdad preferred things very organized and structured, while my stepbrother had a more relaxed approach to tidiness. And I had to quickly learn household vocabulary to communicate effectively, practicing phrases like, "Could you show me where the cleaning supplies are?" Or, "I'd like to set up my study area here. Is that okay?" And narrating my actions aloud helped me process my feelings and clarify intentions. And I remember the first morning vividly, waking up early, trying to navigate the shared spaces politely, saying, "Good morning. Can I use the kitchen first for breakfast?" And my stepbrother replied, "Sure, I'll just finish making my smoothie," which allowed me to practice polite requests, waiting my turn and expressing gratitude with simple phrases like, "Thank you for waiting. I appreciate it." And as we continued living together, I started noticing patterns in our routines, like when my stepdad liked to review schedules in the morning, or when my stepbrother preferred to play music while doing homework. And I practiced describing these routines in English to myself aloud, saying, "He usually checks his emails in the morning before breakfast, and I can use this time to tidy my room," or, "I notice my stepbrother prefers to study with background music, so I can plan to do chores at that time," which helped me develop sequencing language, observational vocabulary, and awareness of daily life patterns. And I also faced situations that required expressing emotions constructively, like when I felt frustrated because shared spaces weren't kept tidy. And I practiced saying, "I feel a bit overwhelmed when the living room is messy. Could we find a way to keep it organized together?" And my stepdad responded kindly, "That's understandable. Let's make a plan that works for all of us." And these interactions reinforced polite communication, expressing feelings and negotiation phrases, which are crucial in a blended home. And as I learned to navigate boundaries, I narrated my own schedule aloud, saying, "I will do laundry after school, and then I can help with dishes before dinner." And I observed how my stepbrother managed his routine, noting he does homework right after lunch, which gives him free time later, and repeating these observations aloud allowed me to practice descriptive language, sequencing and conditional phrases like, "If I finish my chores first, then I can have time to relax or play a game." And over time, I also developed strategies for conflict resolution, practicing phrases like, "I understand your perspective, and I'd like to suggest an alternative that works for both of us," or, "Can we take turns using the bathroom so we don't rush each other?" And I narrated these conversations internally and aloud, reinforcing negotiation, polite requests, and practical English phrases for real-life situations. And adjusting to new routines also involved practicing vocabulary for household tasks, such as cooking, cleaning, organizing, and maintaining personal spaces. And I found myself narrating my actions aloud to remember words and steps, saying, "I am loading the dishwasher. Then I will wipe the counter, or I am folding my clothes and putting them in the wardrobe. And I also described my feelings and reactions, saying I feel proud of keeping my room organized. It makes me feel settled in this new home, and narrating these emotions helped me practice expressive language, emotional vocabulary, and self-reflection. And as the weeks went by, I practiced navigating shared spaces and overlapping routines, like coordinating kitchen use, scheduling bathroom time, and managing study hours. Using English phrases like, "Would it be okay if I use the kitchen for breakfast while you get ready?" Or, "I'll finish my shower first and then it's your turn," which reinforce polite sequencing, time management vocabulary, and real-life conversational skills. And I also found opportunities to bond with my stepbrother and stepdad by narrating our interactions aloud, saying, "We're playing a board game together. I am explaining the rules and he is learning quickly," or "We're cooking dinner together and I'm chopping vegetables while my stepdad stirs the sauce," which allowed me to practice action verbs, teamwork phrases, and descriptive English while developing social and collaborative skills. And as challenges arose, like disagreements over noise levels, shared responsibilities, or differing schedules, I narrated my emotions and proposed solutions, saying, "I feel a bit stressed when the music is loud while I study. Can we agree on quiet times?" Or, "I would like to suggest a schedule for household chores so everyone has equal responsibility." And my stepdad and stepbrother responded respectfully, creating realistic practice in negotiation, compromise, and polite conversation. And narrating these moments aloud helped me internalize the language, build confidence, and strengthen problem-solving skills. And throughout the adjustment period, I practiced describing my daily routines, saying after school I tidy my room, complete homework, and then help with dinner, or I take out the trash in the morning and then prepare breakfast, which reinforced sequencing, routine vocabulary, and descriptive language. And I reflected on each interaction and task, narrating, "I handled that disagreement calmly, and I feel proud of expressing my opinion politely," or, "I am learning to coordinate better with my stepbrother and stepdad," which makes the household run more smoothly. And these reflections allowed me to practice expressive and evaluative language, emotional intelligence vocabulary, and fluency. And over time, narrating routines, emotions, negotiations, and shared tasks aloud helped me not only adapt to the blended home, but also grow in English confidence, fluency, and practical communication, because every daily task, conversation, and adjustment became an opportunity to practice household vocabulary, polite requests, sequencing, conditional phrases, descriptive language, emotional expression, and collaborative dialogue. And reflecting on the experience, I realized that moving into a blended home is about observing, narrating, negotiating, and participating actively, and not expressing feelings, describing routines, making polite requests, coordinating with others, and reflecting on outcomes provides a rich, immersive environment for learning English naturally. And by consistently narrating my experiences aloud, using conditional sentences, descriptive phrases, polite requests, and reflective language, I was able to internalize vocabulary, practice problem solving, develop confidence, and understand the dynamics of shared living. And I hope that by sharing my story as Amelia, viewers can see how adjusting to a blended home is not only a chance to build life skills, but also a unique opportunity to practice English in context. Because every chore, conversation, negotiation, and daily routine is a practical, meaningful lesson in communication, empathy, and fluency, and by engaging fully, narrating your actions and reflecting on your experiences, anyone can transform real-life challenges into effective English practice, build confidence, strengthen collaboration skills, and improve both interpersonal and linguistic abilities. And as I look back, I feel proud of my adaptability, communication growth, emotional regulation, and practical English fluency because moving into a blended home taught me to express myself clearly, listen actively, negotiate politely, describe routines, articulate feelings, and collaborate respectfully, all of which are invaluable skills that will last a lifetime. And I encourage viewers to approach every blended home experience, shared space, or collaborative environment as an opportunity to narrate, communicate, reflect, and grow. Because through practice, reflection, and active participation, English fluency, problem-solving skills, and personal confidence can all develop naturally in everyday life. After settling into the house and starting to understand the routines, I quickly realized that adjusting to a blended home required careful coordination, observation, and communication. And I began by mapping out how each family member organized their day, narrating aloud to myself. My stepdad usually wakes up early to prepare breakfast and check emails, while my stepbrother likes to sleep in a bit and then play video games before starting homework. And by describing their habits, I practice sequencing vocabulary, time-related phrases, and observation skills in English. And as I plan my own routine, I said aloud, I will wake up at 7, have breakfast, and then prepare my study area before school. And I made sure to align my activities with the shared spaces so that we wouldn't overlap or create tension. Practicing polite requests like, would it be okay if I use the bathroom first? Or can I take the kitchen for breakfast while you're still getting ready? And these small interactions help me internalize household vocabulary, courteous expressions, and negotiation phrases. And I found that narrating my thoughts aloud, saying things like, I feel a bit nervous using shared spaces because I want to respect everyone's routine, helped me articulate emotions clearly and practice expressive language. And as days went by, I started to coordinate chores with my stepbrother, narrating aloud, I'll load the dishwasher now, and you can take out the trash later, while he said, I'll vacuum the living room after you finish the kitchen, which reinforced sequencing, conditional phrases, and collaborative dialogue. And when disagreements arose, like music being too loud while I was doing homework or overlapping bathroom schedules, I practiced expressing my feelings politely, saying, I feel a bit distracted by the music. Could we lower the volume for a while? And my stepbrother responded, sure, I can adjust it, which gave me repeated practice in negotiation, polite requests, and emotional expression. And as I observed my stepdad managing household routines, I narrated his instructions and my actions aloud, saying, he asked that I tidy the living room before dinner, so I'll start by organizing the cushions and arranging the books. And I repeated steps aloud while performing them, which helped me internalize descriptive verbs, sequencing, and household vocabulary. And during meal preparation, I described my actions and observations, saying, I am chopping vegetables for the salad, while my stepdad stirs the sauce, and I notice my stepbrother prefers to set the table after I finish and narrating. These routines allowed strengthen my use of present continuous tense, verbs of action, and spatial vocabulary. And I also practice conditional language by saying things like, if I finish the dishes first, then I can help with setting the table. And if my stepbrother finishes homework early, he can help with cleaning up, which reinforce practical conditional expressions in everyday life. And as weeks passed, I reflected on my emotional growth, narrating aloud. I feel more comfortable navigating shared spaces and respecting boundaries, and I am learning to communicate my needs politely while considering others, and I noticed that these reflections helped me develop emotional intelligence, self-awareness, and vocabulary to express feelings in English. And when unexpected challenges occurred, like a sudden schedule change, spilled drinks, or a noisy environment, I narrated aloud. I will clean the spill now and then continue with my homework. And I need to ask politely if I can use the living room for study while it's quiet, which helped me practice problem-solving language, polite negotiation, and self-directed actions in English, and coordinating morning routines, meals, homework, and chores required continuous practice, and I narrated aloud every adjustment, saying, I am brushing my teeth, preparing lunch, and checking the homework list, or I need to coordinate with my stepbrother for bathroom usage and timing of showers. And these narrations reinforce sequencing, time management phrases, and practical vocabulary for daily life. And as I learned to anticipate conflicts, I use reflective phrases aloud, saying, I feel a bit anxious about overlapping schedules, so I will plan in advance and ask for agreement, and I'll remind my stepbrother politely about the time slot for his music, which strengthened conditional expressions, future tense planning, and polite conversational phrases. And during family interactions, I also narrated collaborative moments, saying, we are cooking together. I am chopping vegetables while my stepdad stirs the sauce, and we are folding laundry together. I'll pair socks while he folds shirts, which help practice action verbs, collaborative expressions, and descriptive sequencing. And when we encountered minor disagreements, like disagreements over music, chores, or personal space, I narrated aloud, saying, I feel a bit overwhelmed by the noise. Could we compromise by using headphones? Or I would like to suggest alternating chores this week. And my stepdad and stepbrother responded respectfully, reinforcing polite dialogue, negotiation phrases, and practical English skills. And as I adjusted to household routines, I practiced narrating reflections aloud, saying, I feel proud of completing tasks on time and respecting everyone's schedule, and I am learning to coordinate effectively while maintaining personal space, which helped me practice evaluative language, descriptive vocabulary, and emotional expression. And over time, I noticed that narrating actions, expressing emotions, negotiating solutions, and reflecting aloud enhanced my English fluency, confidence, and practical communication skills. Because every daily task, interaction, and adjustment became a real-life English exercise, and I developed vocabulary for household tasks, polite requests, sequencing, conditional phrases, collaboration, problem solving, descriptive narration, and expressing emotions. And I realized that the blended home provided continuous, immersive opportunities for practicing English in authentic situations, because every chore, conversation, negotiation, and routine required me to communicate clearly, reflect on outcomes, and adapt to new circumstances. And by narrating my actions, observations, and emotions aloud, I could internalize language naturally while building confidence, fluency, and social awareness. And I also reflected on my growth regularly, saying, I am proud of how I am adapting to this blended home, communicating politely, and coordinating routines successfully, and I feel more confident navigating shared spaces, expressing my needs, and collaborating with my stepdad and stepbrother, which reinforced expressive language, evaluative phrases, and self-reflection and thinking back. I realized that the process of moving into a blended home taught me invaluable life skills, including empathy, collaboration, problem solving, conflict resolution, and practical English usage. And narrating each step, emotion, action, and reflection aloud turned daily routines into immersive language practice, helping me build confidence, fluency, and interpersonal skills simultaneously. And by embracing active narration, polite communication, conditional reasoning, sequencing, and reflective thought, I was able to fully adjust to the blended home, manage personal boundaries, contribute meaningfully to household routines, communicate effectively in English, and develop practical, lifelong skills. And I hope that viewers listening can understand how immersing themselves in everyday tasks, narrating actions and emotions, reflecting on challenges, and practicing polite requests, sequencing, and conditional language in real-life situations can transform English learning into a natural, practical, and empowering experience. As the weeks passed and I became more familiar with the blended household, the time came to reflect on everything I had learned and how much I had grown, and I began thinking aloud, narrating my thoughts and experiences, saying, I feel proud of myself for adjusting to new routines, respecting boundaries, and communicating effectively with my stepdad and stepbrother. And I realized that every small challenge, from coordinating bathroom schedules to negotiating chore responsibilities and managing shared spaces, had been an opportunity to practice English fluency, problem-solving skills, and collaborative communication. And I reflected on how narrating my actions aloud, expressing emotions, making polite requests, and describing routines had strengthened my vocabulary, sequencing conditional phrases and descriptive language. And I also remembered the moments of tension that had initially felt intimidating, like when I first moved in and we disagreed about personal space, noise levels, or daily routines. And I realized that by addressing these situations with polite negotiation, careful explanation, and respectful compromise, I had built confidence not only in my English skills, but also in my ability to collaborate and resolve conflicts constructively. And as I continued reflecting, I narrated aloud, saying, I am now able to plan my day around others' schedules while maintaining my own productivity and personal space. And I realized that this ability to balance personal needs with household coordination was a critical skill I had developed through active engagement and practice. And I also observed how my stepbrother and stepdad had grown more considerate, responsive, and cooperative as we communicated more effectively, which reinforced my understanding of teamwork and mutual respect. And narrating these interactions aloud helped me practice descriptive language, action verbs, and emotion-related vocabulary, while also giving me confidence to express appreciation and give feedback, saying things like, "I appreciate how you waited for me to finish using the kitchen," or "Thank you for helping me with the laundry," which strengthened my social and conversational English. And I began to reflect on the routines that had initially seemed complicated. Narrating aloud, I wake up, prepare breakfast, coordinate with my stepbrother and stepdad for shared spaces, complete chores, and follow the household schedule while practicing polite requests and descriptive narration. And I realized that this consistent verbalization of actions and reflections allowed me to internalize vocabulary, conditional phrases, and sequencing language while also fostering fluency and confidence. And as I thought about the personal growth I had experienced, I narrated, "I am proud of how I managed to adapt, communicate, and contribute meaningfully to the blended household while maintaining my own boundaries and sense of independence." And I reflected further on how the experience had strengthened my problem-solving abilities, allowing me to anticipate challenges, plan solutions, and negotiate compromises using English effectively. And I narrated examples aloud, saying, "If my stepbrother needs to use the bathroom while I'm getting ready, I can suggest an alternative time, and if I need the kitchen, I can ask politely for a turn," which gave me repeated practice in conditional reasoning, polite requests, and conversational fluency. And I also narrated my emotional experiences, saying, "I felt anxious at first, but now I feel confident in handling disagreements and coordinating daily routines. And I feel proud that I can express my feelings, negotiate solutions, and maintain harmony in the household." And these reflections help me practice evaluative language, emotional expression, and narrative English. And as I looked back on the entire process of moving into a blended home, I realized that every small interaction, from chore coordination, morning routines, and shared meals to polite conversations and conflict resolution, was an immersive English learning opportunity. And I narrated aloud, saying, "Each task, conversation, and negotiation has helped me practice vocabulary, sequencing, conditional phrases, descriptive language, and polite communication." And I felt a deep sense of accomplishment because I had learned to navigate real-life challenges while developing English fluency, emotional intelligence, and collaborative skills simultaneously. And I also reflected on the lessons learned, that patience, active listening, clear communication, respectful negotiation, and consistent self-reflection are essential for success in both blended homes and real-world collaborative situations. And narrating these lessons aloud helped me reinforce vocabulary, practice problem solving, and internalize strategies for effective communication. And I thought about how I could apply these skills beyond the household, saying I can use these communication, negotiation, and collaboration strategies in school projects, social interactions, and future professional environments. And I also considered how narrating actions and reflecting aloud had helped me process emotions, stay organized, and maintain confidence, saying, "I feel proud that I can manage shared spaces, communicate politely, and contribute effectively while expressing my feelings appropriately and reflecting further." I narrated, "I have developed skills in coordinating daily routines, making polite requests, expressing emotions, resolving conflicts, and describing actions clearly, all in English, which reinforced both fluency and confidence. And as I summarized my journey, I narrated aloud. Moving into a blended home has taught me valuable life skills, strengthened my English fluency, and given me the confidence to navigate new environments, respect boundaries, collaborate effectively, and communicate clearly. And I hope that anyone listening could understand that moving into a blended home is not only a lesson in family adjustment, but also a unique opportunity to practice real life English, build confidence, develop problem-solving skills, strengthen collaboration, and grow personally. And I encourage viewers to approach similar challenges with narration, reflection, and active communication, saying, engage fully, express yourself clearly, negotiate politely, narrate your routines, and reflect on your actions, because these strategies will enhance fluency, confidence, and practical communication skills in everyday life. And as I concluded my reflections, I felt proud of my adaptability, my growth, and the way I had transformed challenges into opportunities for learning, self-expression, and practical English usage. And I knew that the skills I had developed, household vocabulary, polite requests, sequencing, conditional reasoning, descriptive language, expressing emotions, negotiating solutions, and coordinating routines would be invaluable for all aspects of life. And sharing this story as Amelia, I hope to inspire viewers to see every real-life challenge as an opportunity to practice English, build confidence, develop teamwork, and grow personally, and to understand that narrating actions, reflecting on experiences, expressing emotions, and practicing communication actively are the keys to mastering language, collaboration, and problem solving in any blended home or interactive environment, and that by applying these strategies consistently, anyone can achieve fluency, confidence, and meaningful personal growth.